And usually in the morning, as I would wake up, I would go into what I now know was an almost split personality disorder. I would just switch channels, and under the idea that my mom didn't bring me up to be a sad creature crying in the corners, I was dancing and partying and getting A grades in college and having a great time. And every time the pain of grief would come once again, I would automatically, not 1 nanosecond of allowance of that pain, switch into this other character. 2.5 years later, I was traveling in the Pampa in southern Argentina, where the colors of the autumn are much like in New Hampshire, really breathtaking, beautiful, and I was moved by this natural phenomenon. And I remember that, this is 2.5 years later, for the first time, I did not switch. By then, I also discovered that one of my ribs had created in the place where it meets the sternum a calcification. Much like the one the bones grow when after a fracture they need to strengthen the bone structure of the body. And it was a clear indication that what my mind and my heart could not express at the time, I had a broken heart. My body expressed with pristine clarity. A few years later, and once I was already a psychotherapist, and had learned that until, let's say, recent years, grief was supposed to be a mental or an emotional issue, I had the opportunity of meeting Lynn Crochant, who's an outstanding therapist of the San Francisco Bay Area, who created an integrative approach to grief therapy and counseling called the degriefing process. It's an oxymoron. It's impossible to degrief, but she's a very funny character, and that's why she named her technique that way. And we met in South America, and she told me, "Yoga, would you design a routine to address grief?" And I'm going to share with you something that I hid for years. I didn't share it for years because at that point I just grabbed a piece of paper and shot down 8 techniques and gave it to her. And I didn't share that because, you know, being a psychotherapist, I wanted to come across as somebody who had studied a lot and knew who he was talking about. And the truth is that I had no idea. And the truth is that I had all the idea I needed to have because I had the experience and because yoga had happened in me. Today, almost 25 years after that, I can say that I had only added 1 technique to that original sadhana, to that original practice or group of techniques or practices to address the physical, mental, and spiritual symptoms of grief. As a society, we are used to thinking that grief is what happens when people die, is what we feel when people die. And the truth is that grief is a normal reaction to loss. All loss. We grieve the loss of youth. We grieve the loss of a house to foreclosure. We grieve the loss of innocence when abuse happens. We even lose the discontinuation of our favorite brand of sneakers. The condition for us to grieve a loss is that we must be attached to that which we have lost. There are thousands of cats dying in this moment. We're not grieving. But if we've been here all morning and there was this little cat going up and down and we loved it and it reminded us of our childhood and that cat died in front of our eyes, we might grieve. So the precondition for grief is attachment. Now, attachment means something very different for the West and for the East. For the West, where we are, attachment, and thanks mostly to the conceptualizations of Mr. Bowlby, is almost equal to love. He said the way we attach as infants to an attachment figure is the way we are going to love in an adult life. I find this to be an unfortunate correlation because I like to think of it a little bit. It is important. Attachment is important for child development, definitely. Much as it is milk Milk is the one precious liquid that can keep an infant alive. Why do we drink milk when we're 50? Milk is not good, it gives you problems, it increases the bad secretions on the body. It gives us a certain nice feeling before going to bed, but that's an association. From a body standpoint, the truth is that milk is not that good. I wish we could take milk when we are infants and then let go of it. In that same way, I wish we could develop attachments when we are infants and then let go of the attachment and remain loving. Because love and attachment are not the same. In fact, for yoga, love is what's left after you've let go of everything you love. For yoga, love needs of an attachment. And in fact, this is one of the big differences between the East and the West, because for the East and for yoga, as we know, attachment is the boogeyman. Is the one thing that we have to not do in order to succeed spiritually. Because as long as we remain attached to the world and to the worldly things, or even to our ideas or value system, we are bound to suffering. When Patanjali defined the 5 causes of suffering, he said the first one is ignorance of the truth, the second one is egoism, or the false identification with the mind and the body only, the third one is attachment, the fourth is aversion, and the fifth is fear of death. All of these are present in the grieving process, interestingly enough. So no wonder why grief is so painful, and there is so much suffering associated with grief. Now, the point of being completely detached, or I would say unattached, is hard for us human beings, because we inherently attach. Just because of the human condition, we attach. I appreciate the teachings of yoga and the ancient scriptures that say you'll be happier if you don't attach, and I understand that perhaps we need to try to accomplish a middle step, which is detached attachment. Or the ability to still attach and generate that strong emotional bond, but knowing that what we are attached to is going to disappear. Everything is going to disappear, including us. In recent years, and mainly the science of psychoneuroimmunology, the science that studies the relationship between the nervous system, the immune system, and the endocrine system, had discovered that grief is a normal reaction, not a condition, therefore no healing is needed, yet some assistance can be used, because it's a very hard process, hard to go through. And this science knows now that there are 2 main structures that are involved in the grieving process, and deep in the brain is the limbic system, or the system within the brain, the group of structures nested in the center of the brain that deals with emotions. And the other very important part or system in us human beings involved in grief is the endocrine system. When we analyze some of the symptoms of grief, and I don't need to tell you about the emotional symptoms of grief, because most of us know what sadness looks like, or irritability, or lack of motivation, or you name it. But perhaps what's interesting to know is that there are some specific physical symptoms of grief that has to do with the alteration of the circadian rhythms, the rhythms that connect us with the rest of the universe. For example, the sleeping cycle. One of the cycles that gets completely disrupted when grieving, either in the sense of oversleeping or insomnia. The eating cycle. And the eating patterns also get altered, and it could be overeating or anorexia, no eating. We have heart involvement issues, usually going either towards tachycardia, an acceleration of the rhythm of the heart, or bradycardia, a depression of the rhythm of the heart, or arrhythmia, an impulsive change that is somehow unpredictable. We also have breathing pattern issues, and the breath becomes short and superficial, or on the other side, it becomes constant sighing. So as you can see, and as it is easy to relate with yoga, the symptoms can go either towards one side of the spectrum or the exact opposite. And in fact, sometimes they change in one same individual, in one same grieving process. Why to use yoga? Why to do something with grief? Well, because even though it is normal, it is not easy. And if you think about it, and if you think that new grief triggers old grief, and that means that, for example, when my mom died, I didn't process it that much, but she gave me that ring that I loved. And then one day I went camping, I lost my ring. And here I am devastated. And one would say, oh, come on, you didn't even cry that much when your mother died. That's not the point, because not only I am grieving for the ring I am attached to, but the loss of the ring is triggering my grieving process that I did not do, or that even I did for my mom. So, when you think that we grieve not just death, but all the losses of the things we are attached to, and that new grief triggers old grief, and that other people's grief triggers our own grief, and this is why it is perhaps so hard to speak about grief. No one wants to hear you. No one wants to talk about it. People don't know what to do with grief. So, what can we do with it? Well, that's what I designed this routine, this practice for. Because we identify ourselves through our attachments. So, for example, I grew up in Uruguay. I don't know anything about baseball, but when the Giants won, I was so proud. I won. I've never even gone to a baseball game. But yet, because the team is San Francisco, and I love San Francisco, and I've been living there so many times, I have a sense of attachment, and it identifies me. When we lose the things we are attached to, we lose part of ourselves. We lose part of who we are. Now, because we are living, because the body continues to cycle and loses energy and needs to replenish it, and we need to wake up, and we need to drink the water that we lose, we need to continue living. And there is an opportunity. Do we want to continue living as we were, as we have learned, or do we want to establish a new identity? Let's think of a kitchen. I had a kitchen for 20 years. My kitchen had small burners, no ventilation, and my kitchen burns to the ground. I have to cook. I'm hungry. I have to have another kitchen. Am I going to have slow burners or fast burners? Am I going to have ventilation or no ventilation? In the process of identification, we identify ourselves many times with the mechanisms of survival that we have learned in order to survive, psychologically or physically or both. We identify ourselves according to what our parents wanted from us, according to what the magazines told us was cool or not, according to what is acceptable or not for society. Now, in this new identity, in this new process of identification, are we going to identify ourselves through the same things, parameters, paradigms, or are we going to identify ourselves more according to our essence, to who we really are? So this is where yoga comes in strongly. In the process of re-identification, yoga can assist us first dealing with the physical symptoms of grief. Because it is impossible to enjoy a sunrise with a horrible toothache. It is impossible to be present for a new identification if we can't sleep, if we haven't slept for the last 3 months, or if we can't eat, or if we can't make love, or if we can't relate to our spouses or to our friends, or be social, or enjoy the things we used to enjoy. So the first level of this process of transformation relates to controlling some of those physical symptoms of grief that would allow us to be available for the spiritual transformation that grief implies. As Liu Prashant says, grief is one of the most untapped resources of self-knowledge. And yoga, not only through the physical techniques, but through the wonderful technique of Atma-Vichara, or self-inquiry, can help us understand who we are and who we want to be. So some of the techniques that I've integrated, for example, have to do with Pratak, the eye movement that can help the pineal gland reset. So it changes the ratio of melatonin that secretes into the blood system, and it regulates the sleeping cycle. From there, once those rhythms are re-established, we can address, for example, through the practice of sankalpa, or resolve, what is it that we really want to do? How do we want to name a reality? There's a big difference between saying, I am happy, and saying, I am not unhappy. They might seem the same thing. They're not. And because ask and ye shall be given works, because for yoga it's true that the idea we have in our minds is a mold that the universe will be in charge of filling up, we better know what kind of molds we're creating. Because otherwise, that what we don't know, that what we fear, is what we will manifest. So the first tier of action is dealing with the physical symptoms. The second tier of action is preparing the mind for the new identification. And then comes the third, the spiritual aspect, because grief challenges our spiritual beliefs. This is why a lot of people that had a very strong spiritual practice prior to the loss loses the practice, because they get upset, angry at God. If God was good, how could my child have died? Children die. Everything dies. Why would my child not die? And yet it's very hard to accept, and yet it's very hard to understand. On the opposite side, some people who had never been close to spirituality before start their spiritual process at the time of grief, because they understand, they relate to this essential laws of the universe, the sats, the divine truths that yoga is based on, that, for example, say everything starts, develops, and ends, including my child. How long is development is up to my opinion. It might not be up to God's plan, and I might still accept it. Once we are able to control our body, or to bring our bodies to a certain level of control, once we are able to reset our minds towards the new identification, we are ready to embrace the possibility, the spiritual possibility that grief brings about. This is not a simple process, and as it's been said many times in this very same stage, it requires practice. Because along with non-attachment, the other essential issue of yoga, the other essential condition or precondition of yoga for spiritual success is practice. So my program has techniques. Techniques to be practiced, techniques to guide us through the process of re-identification. So hopefully, thanks to a devastating loss, or thanks to a number of devastating losses, we are able to re-identify ourselves, to recreate who we are, and this time, closer to our essence, in accordance to our divine essence, which is, in fact, the only one that matters. And for some reason, we have forgotten. As my master Maharaji, my spiritual master Maharaji says, that what we are looking for, we already have. He says it in a funny way. He says, the fish is thirsty in the water. And that's what we are, thirsty fishes in the water. Of course, you say this to a fish, and the fish is going to say, what water? And that's us. What joy, what abundance, what spirituality. We are surrounded by it. And grief implies an opportunity to tap into it and to tap into what we need to do in life in order to address that spirit, that essence. I'd like to answer a question if you have one. Okay. Do you have any question or anything you would like to say? Please do. Yes?
Is there ever an end to grieving?
No, there is not. And in fact, many theoreticians know that despite the fact that each one of us grieve in a particular way, and there's no right way of grieving, because grieving is universal, it goes through certain stages. I like the concept of William Worden, a man that came up with tasks of mourning rather than stages. Stages are linear and stale. He calls them tasks. He says the first one is to accept the reality of the loss. The second one is to to move through the pain of grief. The third one is to adjust to the new reality. And the fourth one is to relocate the deceased or the lost object and move on with life. These four tasks are not linear. We accept the reality of the loss, we start suffering, and in the midst of suffering we go back to not accepting it. How many times people say, I can't believe she died? How many times 1 year after the death of a beloved, we are still hoping that they will pick up the phone or send us an email? We intellectually know they won't, emotionally we still hope. Even then we adjust, but something happened and we lose our house to foreclosure and we're back not accepting that our spouse died. So these tasks are not linear, they alternate, and even years after a loss, we can experience what Therese Randall named shtucks, sudden temporary upsurge of grief. That horrible thing that happens that in the midst of nowhere and completely unexpected, you are immersed in grief again, as if it was just 5 minutes after the loss. And these shtucks happen forever in life. So no, there is no end to grief, and there is no way of getting over it. The only thing we can do is to change a relationship to it. And the relationship change has to do with not seeing in it punishment, disgrace, and mean, ill intention, but rather understanding that grief is a natural happening in life, a natural factum of life, loss, and that we grieve our losses. Yes?
What are some of the techniques, as we use the word?
Some of the what?
Some of the yoga techniques that we use to ease the physiological response to the grief.
Okay, well, the first one is an ancient technique called Pawan Muktasana, or a technique brought back from the world of Tantra Yoga by Swami Satyananda in the late 50s that is related to making the life force flow. Because we know that every symptom has to do with a blockage of life force, and every time the life force gets blocked, it results in one or another sort of symptom. So the first and the opening technique of the sadhana is to make the life force flow. So from healthier parts of the being, the life force can assist the parts that are more in need. Then I use a technique that I somehow semi-integrated from the world of bioenergetic, but also is present in Chinese medicine and even in Ayurveda, which is called Vayu Chakrasana, or the windmill. A technique that activates the pectoral muscles that are related to Anahat Chakra, which is the chakra that processes grief. Because Anahat Chakra is the wheel or the consciousness or the awareness center where we develop emotional bonding. And attachment is the strongest of all emotional bonds. So by moving the pectoral muscles and by activating the breath in the way of shaking it, in order to re-establish an order practicing pranayama afterwards, we start reversing some of those symptoms. The practice of pranayama, and basically through alternative nostril breathing, but before Mahayoga pranayama or complete breathing, are two of the pranayamas included in the sadhana. The reason to do that is because in order to understand the fullness of the breathing process, we need to understand the fullness of the breath and the fullness of life. So by activating the belly, the ribs, and the chest, by getting in touch with the gut feelings, with the safety net, so we can elaborate those gut feelings into emotions, we need to match that process, we need to mirror that process with an appropriate breath form or pattern, which Mahayoga Pranayama brings. Then alternative nostril breathing brings us the possibility of visiting the opposites. Visiting the opposites, the right and the left, activating the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system and bringing balance to them. Because one of the problems is that the parasympathetic becomes somehow blocked, and our relaxation response is almost impossible. And this manifests in the classical irritability of grieving individuals, but also in the negative anticipatory thinking, which is a very common trait, where grieving individuals cannot anticipate anything good happening to them. No one's going to love me like that. I'll never be able to run again. No house is going to feel so comfortable. It's not true. We might live in an even better house in a few years. But in the moment of grief, and in the moment of acute grief, we can't see that. We can't believe in that. We can't see that. What is it? Okay, that's pretty clear. So, I am very thankful to all of you for having heard this presentation, and of course I am available to speak more about that. And in fact, because I am in front of the research community, I would love to put it up there that I would love to research these techniques. Because even though I know, much as the sadhus knew forever that these things work, I understand the value of proving the validity of it. So please contact me if you're interested in this research, and thank you very much.
So our next speaker is going to be Dr. Christoph Garner, the director at KWA Clinic Stift Rodo from Germany. He will be presenting yoga therapy for neurological rehabilitation. He will be explaining how holistic rehabilitation uses other than mental training methods like yoga, music therapy, mental training by rehabilitation uses, special imagination, psychotherapy, and specific neuropsychologic training. He uses methods to improve the function of paralyzed limbs. So please help me welcome Mr. Christopher Garner to the stage.
I hope we can get live. Namaste to all of you. I will give a presentation on yoga in neurologic rehabilitation. I myself, I may introduce me a little bit, I'm a neurologist, and I'm running a hospital where we are treating people with neurologic problems. Maybe I have to switch this one. No? Can I get the presentation something? Okay. Okay, that's working on it. I hope soon it will work. Most patients we are treating are people with multiple sclerosis. 1 second. Ah, yeah. Now it's working. Thank you. Second, we have patients with stroke. We have children with cerebral palsy and other neurological problems. Since now it might be 17 years when I first met Raghuramji in my clinic, we have also introduced yoga in our therapy concept, and we are very proud of it because it is not usual, at least in Germany, it is not usual that yoga is practiced in rehabilitation clinics. So, it's a little bit difficult for me to read it. I may go this way. First, what I want to show you is that when there is some acute problem in neurologic diseases, I may take the example of a stroke. You have to, in the acute care hospital, you have to take care of the body functions that you survive this effect or this disease. In rehabilitation, we then try to restore these functions that maybe if you have a paralysis, maybe of the right or the left side, we will try to overcome this paralysis. We will try to put you back into life, not only with the body functions, also that your mind is overcoming this shock. We just have heard about grief and all these things. If you have a stroke, your life is not the same as it was before. Not only your life, you are suffering from a stroke, but also your relatives, your wife, your children, all they are affected by this. And we have to reintegrate you into your social life as far as it is possible. How do we do this in neurological rehabilitation? For that, we should look at what our brain is made of. We have in our brain, everybody, 15 to 100 billions of neurons. These neurons are special cells which are not just only round, of a round form like all other body cells maybe. These are cells which have axons and have dendrites. These are long pieces which are connected to other neurons, so that the community of this huge number of neurons, they make out our consciousness, and they are able that we are thinking, that we can move, and all these things. The length of these dendrites and axons together in one single brain is about 100,000 kilometers. So within your brain, if you would stretch it, you can wrap your brain 3 times around the world. So this only to tell you that it's really a huge network. How to learn how we can recover from a stroke or from multiple sclerosis and all these things, we should realize that movements are not, in animals, it is like this, that if an animal is born, immediately after birth, a lot of type of movements are there. Maybe you realize that a giraffe, this animal with these very long legs, maybe 15 minutes after birth, this animal is standing and it can walk with the mother, it can drink, all these things. If you compare this to a baby which is born in human beings, this baby can do almost nothing. It can grasp a little bit at the mother's breast, it can drink, but this is almost all on mechanical functions it can do. And we have to learn movements. Same, it is working in the same way as we are learning words. Yeah? So all movements are stored like words in our memory, what we have learned. So a physical movement is about the same. When we walk or when we throw something, when we eat, is the same as we have learned words to talk with one another. So this picture shows how it is working. That means at birth, we have a very loose network of our neurons, and increasingly, this one is the right one, yeah? Increasingly after months and years, this network gets more dense and more dense, and all these capabilities are stored there. And this storing is made by a connection of these dendrites and axons one with another. So you can see how the density is increasing. Memorizing now means that groups of neurons which are reacting to the same stimulus. And this is working partly in special parts of the brain. Maybe if you have a stroke on the left side of the brain, then you may have a paralysis on the right side. On the other side, the brain is a very complicated structure, and especially memory is not so much localized like movement, but memory is localized like holographic, like working as a holographic principle. That means all the memories are stored in the whole brain itself. When we do rehabilitation, then, as I told you, we have to relearn all the lost movements, and to learn these lost movements, you have to have motivation, repetition, alertness, and concentration. And now yoga comes into the play, but in that way that to improve learning, we have found that yoga asanas, pranayama techniques, meditations, and for advanced patients, I will tell you about this, also this pranic energization technique is very useful to improve and to accelerate this learning. What else is necessary? If you want to relearn, you have to have a quiet atmosphere. There should be no disturbance, no stress, no pressure, and enough time to do all the tasks the teacher or the physiotherapist is going to ask you. Another thing is, on the right side you can see a little bit this network of neurons here. There should be a good mood. We have heard no grief, good mood, good association, no anxiety, no anger. All these things, they are bad for learning. As if you can see also the children at school, it is not good if there is anxiety of the teacher. Before storing of these new patterns in the long-term memory, all these patterns, they are checked by the emotional brain. It is called some brain structure, amygdala, whether this movement is a good movement which will be helpful and it is stored, or it will be blocked. So it is very, very important that you are learning in a good and positive atmosphere. If the atmosphere is bad when you are learning, then the long-term storage is less likely to appear, or the movement will be mentally blocked. In this way also yoga can help to get a good atmosphere for storage.
Not yet.
A little bit, some words over my clinic. The clinic now was founded in 1979, and it is run by a non-profit organization called KWA. We have about 85 beds, and it is situated in the southeastern part of Germany, close to Austria. And we are running a neurologic department, and close to it also a geriatric part where we are dealing with the older people. Also, most of them have Parkinson's, have stroke or other neurological diseases. The patients, mostly they are severely disabled after some neurological event, mostly suffering from stroke or multiple sclerosis. They are in our clinic about 4 weeks, and half come from other hospitals where they have been because of an acute incident, maybe like a stroke or some problems with multiple sclerosis, things like that. And the other patients, they come from at home for rehabilitation after a chronic neurological problem. What are we doing there? Basis of every neurological rehabilitation is the so-called OPAT concept, and we are one of the few hospitals in Germany who are regularly on a daily basis applying yoga therapy. We do this in cooperation with the SVIASA in Bangalore. The other therapies which are used there is regularly we have speech therapy, swallowing therapy, we have neuropsychology, psychotherapy. I myself, I'm a homeopath. I have doctors who are doing acupuncture, and we have some special therapies for increased neuronal sprouting to improve the relearning process. From here, there may be, we have some specialists for osteopathy and for craniosacral therapy. We are doing special massages, hydrocolon therapy, and occupational therapy. This is the routine therapy in our hospital. What about yoga? We have introduced yoga many years ago, and we try to give yoga either on an individual basis, like here. This is our chief therapist, Mr. Garner, and you can see that with patients who have a paralysis, this is a multiple sclerosis patient, if she cannot do the yoga asanas, the therapist, he is helping and supporting for the asanas. We are looking, of course, with all yoga principles, that the atmosphere is good, that there is a strict coordination of breath and movement, and we try to relax spasticity in these people by relaxing strategies which we also take from the yoga theory. There are some pictures I just want to go through quickly. I hope you can see the atmosphere in which these yoga classes are given, and people, they really enjoy this type of therapy, and I think we have very good success with it. These are some other therapies, some humming, and now I'll show you a little bit about our neuropsychology. That means here we are treating patients who have problems with alertness, with memory, things like that, and our therapist with neuropsychology, he also was trained in Prashanti. He is doing breathing techniques and all these things before these training procedures, yeah? Especially mind sound resonance technique, MSRT, he found is very helpful. These are these patients, and we could show that especially ataxia, this is a problem where people cannot really guide their movements, that especially ataxia is responding very nice to these MSRT techniques. Here is a little test. This was before the yoga therapy, and much smoother movements now after yoga therapy. Besides this individual technique, we are giving pranayama groups. Most of our patients, I told you, they are handicapped, so mostly these groups we are doing in a sitting position, and we select yoga asanas, pranayama techniques, what is fitting for their capabilities. Yeah? Also, of course, we give some lectures about what is the sense of yoga. That means it is not a physical sporting training, but yoga, I always tell my patients, yoga is done in the mind. If people come, when I see people in the round and the people say, "Doctor, I cannot go to the yoga class, I'm stressed so much, I cannot follow all these things," then I tell them something must be wrong with my yoga class, because you should be less stressed and not increased stress. And If people say, for instance, I cannot follow the yoga class because of my handicap, I tell them, if you only sit there and watch and hear the atmosphere, this is also yoga. Then they go and they are happy. Yeah. It is not easy because all these patients, of course, they want to follow all the instructions, but they have handicaps. So we have to tell them, and this is a big problem, please, if any asanas you cannot do, please just sit or do whatever you are able to do. Everybody should do what he can do, and he should not look to the neighbor how good he can do it. Yeah? So in most cases we have quite nice results. You see these older patients next to the younger ones, and they do sectional breathing and alternate nostril breathing, aum, singing and humming. All these things are there. Deep relaxation technique, of course, is always the end of our yoga lectures. Now, there was a quite interesting change. In the first 10 years when we were applying yoga, I was thinking that yoga is good for relaxation, calming down and relaxing. Yeah? Then, 3 years ago, some of my multiple sclerosis patients, they went to Prashanti and they came back and told me, well, they learned a very interesting technique called pranic energization technique. And when they learned this technique, they really could move their limbs better than before. A lady, I remember very good, she was paralyzed completely with her lower limbs. She could not move, she could move nothing with her toes, with her feet. She said, after this PET, first time doctor since 10 years, I could move my toes, and after repeating this technique, she started to have also some movement in the knees, and she was very happy. So we tried to introduce this technique in our clinic, and the opposite what was before, when I found that yoga is only a relaxing technique. Now we found that yoga can also nicely used for activation of paralyzed functions. We do this by sending life energy prana to paralyzed limbs, and also I was told you can use this PET technique also if you send it to ill organs, maybe liver, heart, abdomen, things like that, but with that we have not experienced. But we were very happy to increase the function of paralyzed limbs. Also this PET we found is good for creating positive thoughts and positive feelings, because people get better control over their life force. I will go a little bit in detail how we do it in our clinic. First, I try to tell the people how, firstly, to feel the prana itself. I may make a little experiment with you. I hope I have to leave this. If you take your arms and closely close it closer and closer, then at a certain position you will feel some warmth. In my case now, this is a very good place. I have a very high prana. At home it is only like this. Here it is like this, so you have good energy, all of you. Yeah? And there you can feel the warmth and the prana which is in your hands. We can also drain when we do these thumb movements, not just only firmly press your thumb, but you can slowly move your thumb and try to feel when you feel the warmth here. And if you drain this, then you can directly go on with this pranic energization technique, because then it is more easy for you to feel. What do we do with this PET? First of all, we are giving a half hour, 45 minutes, quite normal yoga session with simple sitting asanas. We are doing Kapalabhati, Nadi Shoti, sectional breathing, some cooling pranayama, Brahmari, and we end this first part also with the deep relaxation technique. Maybe if people are not able to lay on the floor, we also accept if they are sitting. 1 second, next one. Then the PET procedure is starting, and we ask these people to get awareness with the breathing with both nostrils. That means normally you are doing Nadishuti closing one nostril, and after that the other nostril with the thumb or with the ring finger. But then we try to breathe voluntarily to the right nostril, and then try to breathe through the left nostril. In the beginning, when Raghuramji first told me this, I thought it is not possible, I only can breathe with both nostrils. But when you try it, you really will be able to breathe with the right nostril voluntarily and with the left nostril. Yeah? So by that you can get control over your prana. The awareness of the breathing will be enhanced. Yeah? Then we ask the people, they should compare whether there is some difference breathing to the right side or breathing through the left side. Yeah? And we try to increase the awareness with the breathing. Next, we guide when we have improve the awareness with the breathing itself. I forgot to say that, of course, what you normally do, you tell the people, please feel the breath going down to the lungs, what is working there, fresh air coming in and used air coming out, all these things. But then, after having got some awareness with the breathing, we ask the people a little bit like the DRT procedure, please guide your awareness to the toes. And now not like when we are doing DRT, relax the toes, but try to feel that prana in the toes. Maybe there is some prickling or there is any feeling what is in the toes there. And then step by step, like in DRT, difference is only we do it on one side only. We try to feel the prana in the heel, in the calves, and on in the body. We try to feel the prana in the fingers, shoulder, up to the head. Then we do the same on the other side. And after completing this pranic feeling, we ask the patients, please now, can you feel the difference where you have inaugurated, where you have improved your prana? So the difference to deep relaxation technique is that now with this PET, you are concentrating not on relaxation like you do in DRT, you are concentrating on awareness, and you are concentrating on the feeling of pranic sensations. DRT is passive, PET is activating awareness. DRT is going from toes to head simultaneously on both sides, and PET, as I told you, is only the left side, right side first, then left side, always comparing. So, next I would show you a clinical study, what we have done 2 years ago with Dr. Patil, who came from SVIASA and did his doctorate in our hospital. And we investigated the effect of yoga therapy on the neurogenic bladder dysfunction in patients with multiple sclerosis. These patients have the problem that due to this multiple sclerosis, they have to go to toilet very often, maybe 20, 30 times a day. And this is a very disabling problem because everywhere where they are, they have to look where is the problem. I have to go to toilet, quickly I have to go there. Even more worse if they are wheelchair bound, and it is a little big problem getting from the wheelchair to the toilet. So this is a very disabling problem. And what we did is that we had for 4 weeks, 2 hours yoga a day. 1 hour was a guided yoga by Dr. Patil, and 1 hour was a self-controlled yoga lecture, because we wanted to train the people that at home they could continue. And Dr. Patil always asked, did you do your homework? Most people did, not all, but most. Number of patients was not so much, it were only 11. And what we were measuring was the number of visits to the toilet per day, and also the resting volume of the bladder. Because of multiple sclerosis, the bladder musculature gets paralyzed, and this is also a problem that they have to use catheters, or they have to use to get catheterized. So we also checked whether the bladder volume could be improved, and the results were very impressive, as well as the number of visits could be reduced significantly, and also the bladder resting volume. There was also, we had also 2 questionnaires about life quality affected by these problems, and also the life quality, subjective of course, what the patients said. They all gave a good scaling about this. So now I want to go to some other therapies we are using besides yoga, so that you can see what is a holistic therapy. This is a Swiss therapy. Oh, sorry. This one is a Swiss machine where the people have to. Wrong. People are fixed with the legs and with the arms to some bicycle-like device. And the interesting thing is that, sorry, what was the wrong one? That when he drives here with the arms and with the legs, it is connected in this way that the arms are a little bit faster than the legs. Yeah? So the brain is the brain gets signals, what is very unusual for the brain, because normally we have a very coordinated movement. We call it a cross movement. When the leg is behind, the arm is in front and opposite. Now, with this desynchronized movement, the brain has to do reprogramming for this movement, and by that, especially people with paraparesis, due maybe to an accident with a broken spine, they are very much profiting from this device. It is called Giga MD, and we are using it quite often. This is gait training. You see one of my doctors. He is standing on a platform here and moving with his gait. He can move a box here, and from above you will see there are coming balls down, and now he has to catch this downcoming balls. Okay, yeah, we finished. You can fetch these balls, and by moving his gait. Some other techniques I shortly can tell you. This is a special massage technique where we can put the musculature in resonance in their own frequency, by that improving. The other method is here a platform which is vibrating. We also can achieve good results. This is a brain stimulating technique called Mathur, where we ask patients to imagine a movement, maybe grasping some apple or waving somebody, not really to do it with the paralyzed hand, and we are measuring the intention. And when the intention is good, then we give some electrical stimulation. We are using some dogs, horse riding. For instance, such as look, we have very nice dogs. They are trained not to bark and be very polite, so children can play with it and caress, and the results are very nice. So this is the last figure. This is a new method where we bind the healthy hand on the body, and the patient is asked forcefully to do all movement with the paralyzed hand. It is called restricted movement therapy. This is a short overview over our techniques, and I thank you for your attention. Any questions?
So actually we're out of time, so if you have any questions, write it down on the index card, and Mr. Garner will answer it later. Thank you. Our final speaker for the health track will be Acharya Shunya Pratichi Mathur, the founder and Acharya of Vedika Global from Berkeley. She will be speaking on aging, immunomodulatory Rasayana therapy in Ayurveda. She will be discussing the benefits of integrating yoga chikitsa with Ayurveda's Rasayana therapy protocols for enhanced health protection and promotion. So help me welcome to the stage Acharya Shunya Pratichi Mathur.
Engagement with you in discussion of the great knowledge from our rishis, Ayurveda rishis from India, by invoking a special thank you to Rishi Patanjali, because in this shlok we recognize him as the giver of not only the great science of yoga for the purification of the psyche, but also the great science of Ayurveda for the purification of the body, and then the great bhasha, so that our speech can also be purified. Yogena chittasya adena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidakena yopakarotam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranatosmi. Such is the great symbiosis and interconnections between the science of Ayurveda and Yoga, that there is a school of thought that believes that Rishi Charak of Ayurveda was none other but Rishi Patanjali of yoga, because they were contemporaries in time period, the same time period. And for people like me who are sitting at the feet of the rishis, I have no reason to question that. It just makes me feel really delighted. I have found that Ayurveda therapy really complements yoga, chikitsa. And the knowledge of yoga as well as Vedanta and other allied vidyas is mandatory for an Ayurveda Vaidya to bring about multidimensional healing in the suffering human being. You know, modern medicine has made a lot of progress, and I and my family and my people of my country of origin and where I live, we are all greatly thankful to the Cartesian Newtonian model that has brought us such great advancement, for example, in the fields of emergency medicine, in the field of arresting communicable diseases, and then in being able to really take forward the surgical knowledge and creating very high-tech advanced surgical solutions, that they are no less a miracle. When we see people who are brought back from the jaws of death due to this high-tech robotic surgery. And I don't mean it in any cynical way. I truly am deeply appreciative of it. But we as an adult community can also contemplate what have we gained and what have we lost. Perhaps what we have lost in the process of calling a high-tech process procedure-oriented disease care system as our medical care insurance guarantee, we have lost somewhere in it the focus upon health. And what does it mean to be vital, joyful, peaceful, loving, content, vibrant, happy? The talk today by Raghuramji this morning symbolized where we are trying to head, and we are trying to head towards a conversation with God, where God says, how are you doing? Are you okay in this world I created? And I can say to God, yeah, I got it. I'm here to be healthy. It's my birthright. I'm here to be whole, happy, and complete. We're not able to have these conversations. We're not. And the reason is because our food, for example, processed. Convenience food, convenience lifestyles. Pesticides, herbicides, wrapped in layers of plastic, old, canned, with an expiry date. What is it doing to our system? For example, our fast-paced, stressful lives, relationships which have become more like online adventures, but no real warm body beings, village community, grandmothers and sisters to nurture us and show us the path. Where are we, the lost and isolated human being? Well, we are filled with disease, and hence we have to stop in this yoga conference because it gives us the opportunity to contemplate why I'm here, and maybe the audience, you and me, the speaker. We are here to celebrate some knowledge from the ancient Rishi tradition of India, which has relevance for all of us in the modern world. Because if we had come into the modern world, if we had really arrived, and then we had said, we're so much happier, so much healthier, so much better, thank you very much, then we may just as well close our granthas, our shastras, and put them to rest. But the reality is that we are needing this knowledge, whether it is awaiting validification from research or not. One line read from a shastra gives us relief to the suffering mind. Some of you will agree. This is almost like Pratyaksha Pramana now, where this knowledge works, it is giving us the relief, and we get connected to a higher vibration, a higher state of being, and a higher message that we have come here to embody. Given this context, I want to present to you this anti-aging immunomodulatory Rasayana therapy in Ayurveda, a complementary approach with Yoga Chikitsa. I wanted to put that there, not because I'm here at a yoga conference, but I really do believe that this Rasayana Chikitsa is something going forward, if there are organizational heads and other people here, that Rasayan, the knowledge of Rasayan and another science called Vajikaran and another science called Swastavritta should be included in the curriculum of yoga therapists, because sometimes a yoga therapist knows many beautiful ways of bringing about healing and wholesomeness to the body through the Ashtanga yoga process and through the Karma yoga, Bhakti yoga, etc. mark. But at the same time, there may be a body which is actually having some acute physical need, and that need can be met by certain rasayanas. So what are these rasayanas? These rasayanas are very special agents. They could be food-based, they could be herbal, or they could be behavioral. And so these are strategies devised by the rishis thousands of years ago, speculating much in advance that every decade or so the human body undergoes certain bio-losses. And if we can speculate, we can plan ahead so that every decade a certain target rasayana or this special agent, usually herbal or food-based, can be introduced into the diet or regimen of that person so that we can maintain maximum functionality and aging is delayed and disease is prevented. Rasayana therapy usually does not require deep investigation of pathology, or because it is living outside the disease model. When you have a disease model of Ayurveda Chikitsa, then somebody has to go to an Ayurveda separate person and a yoga therapist separately. But when you are looking at the health improving model of Ayurveda, then these healthy regimens were actually at one time known to our grandmothers, aunties and parents, yes Raghuramji? And now they are being forgotten. And you see, this forgetfulness is not just something we modern people have to feel shameful about, but this has been an ongoing process. And I will just give you an idea for some of you who are academically minded. Rasayan Tantra or Rasayan Chikitsa is an entire sub-part of the ocean of Ayurveda. In Charak Samhita, which is the oldest of the text, it was the first chapter of the Chikitsa Sthan, or the section dealing with Chikitsa. Then when we moved on to Sushtata, it took on the status of being the 27th chapter. And by the time we reached 8th century AD in Acharya's compendium, which is what is taught in most universities today, well, it is at the very end of his entire treatise. So it had become almost like an adjunct therapy. So at one time in Ayurveda, when you talk about Chikitsa, it meant, if we are good, let's get better. If we are better, how is magnificent? Are you magnificent? Are you experiencing God? So they even had a concept of Divya Rasayanas, which convert an otherwise healthy human being and his mundane, humming along consciousness into spiritually evolved consciousness. And the shloka says, and now yoga is achieved. So yoga achieved through superfoods, and these superfoods don't live in plastic bottles with colored chemicals in them. These superfoods live and grow in forests, in trees, and they are naturally imbibed. For example, one Medhya Rasayan Brahmi or Shankapushpi, today we know it as a tablet, or we may know it as additive to a very famous composition called Medhavati. or we may know it as a powder, which is with a relative shelf value. But the way I know it is, it grew everywhere around my house. And all you had to do was make a kalka with it, take the juice out, put it in your nose when you were feeling irritable. And I was a naughty child, so my mother always felt I needed Brahmi drops every day. And thank God she did it, because my Mars in my first house got converted into someone who is standing up for what I believe in. And what I believe in is this knowledge, and that it works. And it has transformed everything in my life, everything in the life of my students, and the people who really care to know more about it. So this is the context. I decided that I didn't have an agenda to give you in the 20 minutes. I really loved it when I was told that these talks are based on TED Talks. So I had to go and Google TED. What is a TED Talk? And I'm really thinking I'll write a book, and I will write in it my life sponsored by Google, because it is so knowledgeable. So I would like you to go and look up more on Rasayana. If you write to me, I'll be happy to send you this information, the PowerPoint that I have, because I really do believe that this knowledge should be out there. So what is a Rasayana? This is really important. And so I wanted to write to you, I wanted to say to you just a few things about Rasayana. So Charak, our beautiful Rishi, says, Rasayanam cha tajgeyam yajajara vyadhi nashanam. So Rasayan is that which destroys jara, aging, and vyadhi, which is disease. So this is what a Rasayan is. And how does it act? Labho payo hi shastanam, rasadi nam rasayanam. So it says that when we are able to introduce nutrition into the rasa dhatu, or the deep nutritive tissue within our body, and we are able to bring about tissue perforation, circulation, and activation, so that each and every cell in there is humming and vibrating with target nutrition, then through that, the dhatus or the tissues, their health improves. And when dhatu health improves, organ health improves. When organ health improves, the whole body's health improves. And you have to take my word on this while I sing you this shloka, but it's really true, because I've been seeing its effect in my own personal life, how really poor health has been recovering through the intake of right rasayanas. So what are the benefits of rasayan therapy? Dirgha ayuhu smritam, medha marogyam tarunanvah, prabhavarna swaradaurya, Dendriya balam param, vak siddhim pranatim kantim, labate na rasayanat. So dirgha ayu, long age, improvement in the memory, medha, intellect, arogyam, something we all want, tarunam, like a youthful person we become, prabha, luster, varna, complexion, swara, speech, deha indriya balam, body, indriya, senses, balam param, a very excellent kind of sthirita, balam, stability come into us, and vaka siddhim, whatever you say has an impact. Otherwise we are saying, and we are also, our throat is also hurting, and the other person is also not hearing. So achintaniya virya, something that we cannot even rationalize happens. And vaka siddhim, what we say, we become a manifester of that. And pranatim kantim, we become well known, illustrious, full of kanti or tej that is coming through our being. This is just what happens with Rasayan therapy. Let me work on this gadget to see if I can move ahead. This is a short idea about how in the first 10 years of age, we just stop growing, period. You know, all the growth aspect happens after the first 10 years, it stops. So during the first 10 years, for example, have you heard of Amala, Chavanprash? That is why we give Chavanprash, because it contains Amalaki, or Bala, that is another herb. Let us go all the way to age 51. That is the time you were staying away from glasses. But after 51, you have to make an appointment, because the rishis tell us that this is the time when drishtihani, or we start having vision loss. And there is so much research on Rasayan now, and I have slides to prove it. However, it is really important that you coincide how the rishis had this special knowledge, their satyabuddhi, their pragya was so advanced that they could give us this knowledge. So say when we turn 51, we start taking trifla water, we start doing for our eye, like an eye bath, and Jyotishmati we start taking it as an herb. There are chances that we may not need the glasses. Now let us look at, for example, the 41 to 50, skin. Someone like me who is now in this range, I always had easy skin, no pimples, no acne. That is because Ayurvedic people will know I don't have a lot of pith in me, I'm more kapha dominant. So I had a calm skin, a shita skin, shita mridu skin. However, at age 41, after this age, I have been noticing that I have been needing to take certain skin supplements, and that led me to create a whole skincare line in my students so that they can cook it and I can apply it. But it contains these herbs, for example. So this is wonderful. Around 61, we start losing virility and potency and sexuality, not because we want to necessarily create progeny, but our Shukra not only represents fertility, but it also represents power, and therefore we want to keep it healthy. And so some ashwagandha added to milk, or ashwagandha prash, ashwagandha ghritam, ashwagandha in some form would be recommended, and great benefit can happen. So this is just a bird's eye view of Rasayanam. And then let us look at tissue-based. This is just amazing. So for example, if somebody has any question of cardiac health, people say, I have cardiac history in my family, I have cancer history in my family, I have a problem of nephritis and kidney failure in my family. Well, we have nephroprotectives. We have cardioprotectives like Arjun, Gokshur. Gokshur taken for a considerable period completely changes the life of people who get frequent urinary tract infections. The question is not whether we need the best antibiotic or have we become resistant to it. The question that Ayurveda would ask is, why are you getting the repeated infection? That means that your Medadhatu, of which the kidney system, I should stay into only English, where the kidneys have become weaker, that is the area that needs a special rasayana, and Gokshur can be taken. And Gokshur grows like grass and like weed, and the tribal people know it, The villagers know it in India. They don't have to go for antibiotics and buy expensive insurance. They just make a tea of Gokshur, drink it, and they do it regularly until that problem never comes back. So that is something really wonderful. So this is based on the system and its protection. Then we have, for example, there were some special rasayanas. This is not medicine. This is not disease-based. This is health-based. For example, Haridra or Haldi is a great rasayana for people who have diabetes. So is Amalaki. Shilajit is another rasayan, for example. Any disorder of Kushta, any skin problem. Then Tuvarak is, for example, a rasayana for the skin condition. So when you have this rasayana, now let us look at musculoskeletal pain issues. Then Rasona is nothing but garlic, you see. Garlic, gugul, vacha, these are the rasayanas. So we had this concept of improving things by taking friendly agents that the body can understand. And this was not had to be taken in the form of like the garlic capsules.
Oh no, we don't have to do we don't have to set up more factories to do it. Just eat it, for example, you see. And in nano doses. We don't need large doses of rasayana because they will end up just obstructing the pathways and the channels, as the previous distinguished speaker was talking about the dendrites. So these dendrites or these pathways, the neural pathways, these are like channels of transportation. And you may agree that sometimes they can get blocked. In the same way, the whole body, according to Ayurveda, is full of srotas. So rasayana has to be something that won't block the channel. It will in fact go through the channel like Google and clear the channel, make the channel healthy and leave the body. This is the beauty. So while I'm talking about channels, I want to say rasayanas work in 3 ways. They work, number one, by adding nutrition to the body. And there is a concept of ajastrik rasayana or rasayana that we eat in the daily food. Ghee is considered daily rasayana. Godugdha is considered a rasayana. Praval is considered rasayana. In our food, it is considered rasayana. And so, some rasayanas act by giving nutrition to the rasadhatu or to our main nutritive foundational tissue, which is a mother tissue and feeds the rest of the body. And so in a sense it was a very ancient nutraceutical concept. Then there is the second way is that it works in improving the integrity of our metabolism. So for example, dry ginger powder called shunthi, that is something that will not only improve our digestive system but our cellular reception and metabolism of the food that we are giving. Sometimes in many diseases we give medicine and the body does not respond because at the cellular level also metabolism is not working. And so things like shunthi or dry ginger, chitrak, garlic, these are all things that help with the agni or the digestive fire. The third way they help, of course, is making sure that the transportation to the cells and back, elimination, transportation of the right vital essence, the delivery is obtained and we have achieved it. So this is another way of giving rasayanas. Then we have the concept of medhya rasayan. Medhya rasayan like mandukaparni, brahmi, shankapushpi, guduchi, muletis, just like our good old licorice. These are all given in the form of kalka, where the leaf or the active body part of that plant would be made into a paste and it would be either eaten, applied, or its juice removed, drunk, or put in the nose. That's typically through the oral route or through the nasal route to reach the brain and the sinus and the higher pathways. Now, this is a class into itself. And I know there is a lot of research happening in medhya rasayan for Alzheimer prevention, for just regular memory improvement. But medhya rasayan not only works on memory, which is something that the modern world is very worried about, but the yoga Ayurvedic concept of the mind encompasses 3 vital functions, which is called dhi, dhriti, smriti. Dhi is the discrimination power. And dhriti is the forbearance power. Smriti is the recall of the right knowledge at the right time, so that we can be in a state of yoga and well-being. Oftentimes we know the right thing, but at that moment we cannot recall that this was our sankalpa and we had to do such and such, because memory has failed. Or memory we remember, yet willpower has failed, dharana shakti. Or we just cannot discriminate, we are confused. Somebody says try this, we try that. Somebody says try that, we try that. So dhi, dhriti, smriti, their samyak yoga occurs due to this medhya rasayana concept. So then we have the next, which is Acharya Shunya, lovely. So this is a very long topic. Acharya, like the yama niyamas of the Ashtanga yoga, and in fact the entire Vedic Indian heritage is about Acharya. It is not just about vak, what you have said, it is how you behave. It is about you walk the talk, not just talk the talk. So Acharya is that, and it really prevents things like psychological emotional excess, pathological sexual behaviors, or dysfunctional interpersonal sociological imbalances. I can just give you one or two lines. For example, one shloka begins in Charak Samhita with Satyavadana Makrodham. Right? So Satyavad. So we say own your truth, embrace your truth, talk your truth, live your truth. Well, Satyavad. There you go. If you will live by your truth, speak your truth, whatever it is, you will have a healthy behavioral health. Because when we don't speak our truth, we feel oppressed, we feel suppressed. Our Atma is Sakshi to it. It knows we have lied, we have not lived up to our true potential. And similarly, the last one is Nivrittam Madhya Maithunat. What? That this excess in alcohol, excess in sex, all of this also one has to avoid. So these are social inhibitors, but they are considered a rasayanam for the healthy human being. And I have 2 minutes or 1 minute? 1 minute. So okay. This was I love this piece about how Guruchi, Ashwagandha, Tulsi, and Guruchi, Ashwagandha, Tulsi, and Haridra. These 4 rasayanas have been studied in so much detail individually and then collectively, and they brought about immunomodulation by strengthening the immune response of the body so that aging doesn't take place prematurely and disease is defeated naturally because we are meant to be healthy people. So thank you for hearing my views, my ideas, and my presentation. I hope that I can leave you sparked with at least wanting to know this word rasayana and studying about it, incorporating it into your life. And if you are a future yoga teacher or a yoga teacher, wanting to have some systematic knowledge about it so that these rasayanas can once again replace or at least complement all the other bottles and jars we have for health. And if we can provide decade or age-based support for our clients, then they will be more thankful and benefit from the combined integrated approach that the rishis always taught us, because the rishis and sadhus back then did not certify in Ayurveda or yoga. They were devoted worshippers of all these knowledge, and they used them with great judicious wisdom. Jai Ma. Thank you so much.